In this video, we're going to talk about what controls the depth of V-carving in VCarve Pro. The depth of a V-carve is based on two things or a few things. One is the width of what you're carving and the angle of the cutter. Those are the only two things you could really do to control the depth. And what we're going to take a look at is different methods used to be able to create those. So we have a basic text drawn, a star, and then a rectangle used for pocketing. I've already created some pre-calculated toolpaths. The text is being used with a 90-bit, another same text being calculated with a 60-degree bit. So a lot of this video is just going to be covering what we do to control the depth or how to get it to cut a little bit deeper. So we're going to first start by previewing what this text looks like using a 90-degree V-bit. So I'm going to reset the preview, and with the 90-degree text selected, I'm going to preview the selected toolpath. The depth of this cut could be seen or be determined by looking in the lower right corner of the screen. As you move the mouse around, the values of X, Y change, and then as we move over a carving or a depth of cut, you could see that Z value changes as well. And right there we see a total depth of 0.51 inches. In a lot of cases that may not be too deep, or that isn't a whole lot of depth to really show up in some wood, so you might want to cut a little bit deeper. To be able to cut this deeper and to be able to maintain the same text spacing, about the only thing we could do is use a sharper degree bit. For example, we have this 60-degree bit already pre-calculated, and I will preview this, and we could see that the width of those letters remain the same, but the total depth now is down to looks like a 0.8 that we saw in there, 0.846. And let's jump back over to the 2D view and take a look at how that is determined. Up top here, I've drawn out a profile of two cutters. One is a 90 and one is drawn out as a 60. I'm just going to bring that over and place it over top of the center or midpoint of the letter I, and do the same thing with this 60-degree V-bit. I'm also going to add a checkbox here to make this 90-degree visible, and also the 60-degree making that visible. Now notice the path for both of those that we're seeing here are almost identical. There isn't really a difference of where the center of that bit is going to follow based on the different angles. What does change is the depth. The depth is based on the width of this letter or the closed vector, and we could see that the intersecting depth is going to be from the intersecting on the outside edge to the center point of the V-bit. So we could see this by going to use the measure tool, going to snap the measuring tool from the point of that line, just covering over top to where that is. We can notice on the left side, the total Y distance is 0.06 for the 90, and the total distance is for the 60 is roughly 0.09 inches deep. So to get a deeper cut and also be able to still maintain the width of the letters, the one thing we could do is change the angle and make this a sharper degree angle bit. Start depths do not change the depth of the cut. Well, it sort of does. And we're going to take a look at the same toolpath using a start depth of 0.04 deep and a start depth of 0.125. So the start depth is not intended to be able to get a V carving to cut deeper. It is intended to use if you've already cleared out an area at that depth and you want to start the cutting from that depth. But we'll take a look at that in the preview as well. Again, just using the same preview, using the start depth with a 60-degree V-bit set to a start depth of 0.04. We'll preview what this looks like. And yes, it did cut deeper, which is maybe what you want, but it also made the width of all these letters a little bit bigger, and we've lost the sharp corners on the outside of all the lettering. So this is intended as if we had already cleared out an 0.04 depth. We could see this even more exaggerated by using a start depth of 0.125. And it did cut a lot deeper, but notice that we are really radius corners and we're not getting that V carving effect that you might want. What that start depth is for is if you have already pocketed out an area of a set depth. For example, this pocket depth I have set to pocket out to a total depth of 1/8 of an inch, and we will preview what that looks like after setting the V-bit carving here. And now we are back to our total depth of cut being that 0.9 depth from the start depth of a quarter or of 1/8 of an inch that we've already removed. This type of method is useful for lettering for painting and such. So it could be that you first V-carve at a start depth of 1/8 of an inch. This allows you to then paint over, spray paint, or whatever these letters and not have to worry about overspray onto the piece itself. Then you could come back and clear that out with a pocketing toolpath that would then remove all of that paint and give you the crisp lines that you expect to have from V-carving. To better explain the depth control or how V-carving is used based on the depth, this star is been calculated toolpaths, one using a 90-degree, one using a 60-degree, and then we are able to limit the depth using the flat depth. So let's first toolpath preview using the star with the 90. So coming over to the 3D view with the star 90 selected, going to use the preview selected toolpath. And we could see that that toolpath kept getting deeper and deeper until that bit touched the outside corners and also created a V. So the center of the star is going to be at its deepest, which is almost a negative 0.7 inches, 6.9 inches down into that material. And we could see it by using the checkbox here and rotating this around. We can see it keeps making passes deeper and deeper. Doing the same thing with the 60-degree bit, it's not going to change the overall size of the carving. It's just going to go deeper. And we could see that by going much farther deeper. And I will say I did get a warning that I was going to cut through the material when I calculated this toolpath. And the reason that it's going to cut through is the angle of that bit keeps going deeper and deeper. And that's how deep it goes and down into the table. Now we can limit the depth, and that is what the flat area clearance tool is, or the flat depth is set to. Is set right now to 1/4 of an inch. I have to reset the preview so we could see the effects of this. Start with the flat depth, and I will preview the selected toolpath. And in this case, it limits its depth to the setting of the flat depth, which was 1/4 of an inch. And in this case, I also did not choose to use a larger diameter area clearance tool. It used the same 60-degree V-bit, or the same V-bit, to flatten out the areas to get a smoother area clearance, you would use a setting here to use the clearance tool, making sure you select a tool that is of a flat depth. And then when you select that, it would give a much smoother bottom finish, and then it still uses the V-bit to get into the areas of the flat depth that the eighth-inch bit could not get to. So that is the basics of being able to get a deeper V carving into material. Again, about the only ways to do it is going with a deeper cut, meaning a sharper degree angle, using a 60 versus a 90, or making the shape larger, giving it a wider distance between the vectors. Hopefully this clears some things up.